A nose ring has one of the oldest meanings in human history. For thousands of years, it was placed on animals and people to show they were owned and controlled. But today, millions of people are putting them in voluntarily and calling it freedom. Studies show people with heavy piercings score significantly higher for trauma, impulsivity, and emotional issues. So the real question isn't what a nose ring looks like. It's what it tells you about the person wearing it, and the answer might surprise you.
Septum theory is a theory in which everybody who has a septum piercing is unstable, weird, or has had trauma in their past. Everybody I've ever met who does have a septum piercing, including myself, falls into this category.
Well, at least he's honest.
Before we go any further, I want to ask you to stay with me all the way through. Don't form your opinion in the first few minutes. Hear this matter out completely, because what I'm about to share deserves your full attention. Welcome back to Family Still Matters. I'm Deborah. You've probably seen it 100 times. Someone with a nose ring tells you they're free thinking, independent, and done with society's rules, right? But their relationships are a disaster. Their emotions are all over the place, and everything in their life seems to be in chaos. If you've ever looked at that and thought something deeper was going on, you're right. And if you're the one wearing the nose ring, this video isn't an attack. It's a conversation, just a conversation I feel is worth having. By the end of this video, you'll walk away with a clear understanding of where the nose ring comes from historically, what the research actually says about body modification and emotional health, and the specific patterns that explain why so many people with nose rings openly admit that unresolved pain is running their life. Here's the hard truth. The symbol you think is saying, "I'm free," may actually be telling the world something very different about where you are emotionally. Most people who get a nose ring today think of it as a personal style choice. But the nose ring has a history that goes back thousands of years, and it didn't start as a fashion statement. Understanding where it came from changes how you look at it entirely. The nose ring was used across multiple ancient cultures, but not as decoration for the free. In many of the cultures, it was placed in the nose of livestock and working animals to control their movement and behavior. In some cultures, it was also used on enslaved people for the same reason, as a symbol of ownership and control. Now, some will argue that in certain cultures, like parts of India and the Middle East, nose rings were worn by women as symbols of beauty and marital status. That's true. But even in those contexts, the ring carried a social meaning tied to belonging to someone, a family, a husband, a tribe. The wearer didn't choose the meaning. The meaning was assigned to them. So when someone today says they're wearing a nose ring as an act of rebellion or personal freedom, it's worth asking, do they actually know the full history of what they're wearing? The symbol chosen to express independence has historically been one of the clearest signs of dependence ever created. That's not an opinion. That's the historical record. But history alone doesn't explain why so many people today with nose rings seem to be struggling emotionally And that's where the research gets very interesting. There are now multiple peer-reviewed studies examining the connection between heavy body modification and emotional and psychological patterns. These aren't internet opinions or social media theories. These are published findings from psychology and public health researchers. And what they consistently find is very hard to dismiss. Study after study points in the same direction. People with high numbers of piercings and tattoos are significantly higher for trauma history, impulsivity, and sensation-seeking behavior than those without. One study for BMS psychology found a strong correlation between body modifications in individuals who experience childhood abuse and neglect. Another study found a notable prevalence of borderline personality disorders among people with a high number of body modifications. Now, some people will push back on this and say, plenty of stable, healthy people have piercings and tattoos, and that is true. One piercing does not indicate emotional instability, but we are not talking about one piercing. We're talking about a pattern, heavy modification, particularly facial modification, that the research keep connecting to unresolved emotional pain. The people who openly admit that their past wounds are controlling their present lives while also displaying multiple facial piercings are not outliers. They are actually consistent with what the published data shows. The body is often communicating what the person has not yet been able to fully say out loud. Body modification in and of itself is not the problem. But for a significant number of people, it functions as a visible signal of invisible pain that has not been properly addressed. And once you understand that, the pattern becomes very difficult to unsee. Which brings us to the nose ring theory itself, and why so many people who wear nose rings are actually confirming it every time they argue against it. The nose ring theory began as a widely shared social observation that people with septum rings tend to use their unresolved pain to define who they are. It spread quickly because so many people recognize the pattern immediately from their own lives and relationships. But what most discussions miss is the deeper dynamic underneath it. Here is what is actually happening. People who have experienced serious emotional pain often use external signals to communicate that pain without saying it directly. Heavy facial piercings and extreme body modifications are visible. They demand a reaction. They filter people in and out. And for someone who grew up feeling unseen, unheard, or unsafe, that serves a real psychological purpose. Some people will tell you directly, I want to repel certain people. I want only specific people to approach me. And on the surface, that sounds like personal strength. But look closer. That's not confidence. That is a protective response rooted in fear. The deeper problem is that the type of attention heavy facial modification tends to attract often comes from people who are also carrying unresolved emotional wounds. And that is how the cycle continues. The same chaos keeps showing up. The same relationship problems keep repeating, and the person keeps asking why, when the answer has been visible the entire time. The nose ring theory is not simply internet commentary. It is a pattern that research supports, that lived experience confirms, and that a notable number of people wearing nose rings have openly admitted is true about themselves. The real question is not whether the pattern exists. The real question is, what are you willing to do with that information? On this channel, we talk about family, faith, culture, and real issues that are impacting our homes and our families. And the health of our families starts with the health of individuals inside of them. That's why we don't shy away from hard conversations. We have them with honesty and with care. If this video gives you something to think about, I love to hear from you. Leave a thoughtful comment below. Your perspective matters. And if this conversation was valuable to you, like it and share it with someone who needs to hear it. I'm Deborah, and this is Family Still Matters. And what we carry on the outside and what it reveals about what's happening inside matters too. May God continue to richly bless you. Thank you.